The evening light spilled through the windows of my home office, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where so many memories were etched. I traced the edge of the silver-framed wedding photo in front of me and Mia on our wedding day nearly 5 years ago. Her smile back then seemed so genuine, her eyes full of love and hope as she gazed at me. Now, looking at it, all I saw was a hollow reflection of what once was, a painful reminder of what I thought we had, Dot. The quiet hum of my computer interrupted the oppressive silence, followed by a soft ping, a new notification from the hidden camera I'd installed in the living room. I didn't want it to come to this, but Mia's erratic behavior over the past year left me with little choice. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, painful and inevitable. My stomach twisted as I minimized my work emails and clicked on the feed dot. The living room was empty, as it had been the last dozen times I checked. I hated this. The need to spy on my own wife was a nightmare I hadn't envisioned. But I couldn't deny what was happening anymore. The subtle changes in Mia had grown from a faint whisper to a scream I couldn't ignore. It started with secretive phone calls she took outside, claiming they were about work. Then came the late nights, the endless weekend meetings. The excuses piled up until they felt like a wall between us. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to believe. But little things kept piling up. She changed the way she handled her phone, angling the screen away from me whenever she texted. Her phone password changed. The new perfume she'd started wearing was something I'd never seen. Her behavior became increasingly distant, especially after we'd struggled with having children. The doctor had told us there was no reason we couldn't conceive. But I saw the way Mia looked at me after each visit, as though I were the problem, as though I'd failed her. Sometimes these things take time, the doctor had said gently. But Mia's muttered response, just loud enough for me to hear, was, "Or some people just aren't cut out for it." I pretended I didn't hear it, but her words lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. Each passing week only made it worse. I felt like I was being suffocated under the weight of her contempt and my own helplessness. A knock on the office door jolted me from my thoughts. "Hey, big brother, got a minute?" my younger brother Chris asked as he walked in. He was everything I wasn't: confident, stylish, successful, and perpetually in the spotlight. Our parents adored him, and he knew it. I turned away from my computer, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'm busy, Chris," I said curtly, Dot. He strolled in anyway, lounging in the chair opposite my desk like he owned the place. "Too busy for your only brother? Come on, Drew, don't be like that." "What do you want?" I asked, barely concealing my irritation. Chris was a constant reminder of every shortcoming I'd ever been made to feel by our parents. He always had their praise. I was always second best. "Mom and Dad are planning a family dinner next weekend," he said. "They wanted me to make sure you're coming. Said you've been avoiding their calls." His tone was casual, but it was clear he was playing the dutiful son once again. "I'm busy," I repeated, turning back to my screen. "Too busy for family?" Chris pressed. "Mia already said she'd be there." The mention of Mia made me pause. "You talked to Mia?" I tried to keep my voice even, but I couldn't ignore the pang of suspicion. "Yeah," he said, his voice light. "Ran into her at lunch. She seemed excited about it." A chill ran through me. How many of these so-called chance meetings had there been? "I'll think about it," I said. Making it clear the conversation was over, Chris stood, still managing to radiate casual confidence. "Don't think too long," he said. "You know how Mom gets." As soon as he left, I pulled up the camera feed again. My paranoia had become a reflex. I hated what this was doing to me, but I couldn't help it. When the feed showed nothing out of the ordinary, I switched over to the call logs from our shared phone account. That's when I saw it. Calls between Mia and Chris, long calls that went well into the night. Calls that she'd claimed were about work. The walls around me seemed to close in. I needed more proof. Suspicions alone wouldn't hold up in court, and I knew it. My lawyer had been explicit about that when we met last week. "We need evidence, Drew. Solid proof. Without it, you'll have nothing." Hours dragged by as I worked, but my mind was elsewhere. The sun had set, and I'd barely moved when I heard a car in the driveway. Mia was home early for a change, just before 10. I switched over to the camera feed again, watching her walk into the living room. She still wore her work clothes, a tight black dress that clung to her in all the ways I'd once admired. But now, it felt like a disguise. She moved to the couch, her phone pressed to her ear. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered into the phone, pacing. "He deserves to know." There was a long pause. "No, I know what we agreed on, but—" "Yes, fine. Tomorrow." She hung up, her hand trembling as she placed the phone on the coffee table. I closed my laptop, my heart pounding. Tomorrow. Whatever was happening, whatever they'd been plotting, would come to a head tomorrow. Making my way downstairs, I found her in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine. Her movements were jerky, unsteady. "Rough day at work?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She jumped, nearly spilling the wine. "Drew, you startled me." "Didn't mean to." I leaned against the doorway, watching her carefully. "You're home earlier than usual." The meeting ended early. She took a long sip, not meeting my eyes. Interesting. I walked closer, each step deliberate. "How was lunch with Chris?" Her hand tightened around the glass. "What?" "Chris stopped by my office. Mentioned running into you." I tilted my head, waiting. "Funny, I thought you had client meetings all day." "It was just a quick lunch," she stammered, trying for nonchalance. "Didn't seem worth mentioning." "Strange how you two seem to run into each other so often lately." "He's your brother, Drew, it's not—" She placed the glass on the counter with more force than necessary. "Why are you interrogating me?" "Am I?" I stepped closer. "Or am I just trying to understand why my wife is lying to me?" Her face paled, and for a moment I saw fear in her eyes. She tried to brush past me, but I caught her arm, not rough, just enough to stop her. "No more lies, Mia," I said softly. "What's happening tomorrow?" She pulled away, her expression hardening. "You really want to know? Fine." She walked to the living room, her steps determined. I followed, feeling the weight of what was coming. Everything was being recorded, and I wanted it that way. She turned to face me. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words hung in the air, suffocating me. "It's Chris's." I'd known this moment was coming, but the reality of it shattered me. She kept talking, her words sharp and cutting. "We've been seeing each other for over a year. He gave me what you couldn't." The room felt cold, and I struggled to stay composed as Mia laid out her betrayal, each word hitting me like a hammer. "Chris gave you what I couldn't?" I repeated, my voice eerily calm. Inside, everything was chaos, a storm of rage, pain, and disbelief. "Yes," she said, meeting my eyes with defiance. "I'm not proud of how this happened, but you need to understand. I needed more. More." I let the word linger between us, as if it could somehow encapsulate the magnitude of what she'd done. "You mean my brother?" Her lips tightened. "Chris understands me. He gives me what I've been missing, and now with the baby—" "Stop." I held up a hand. I couldn't bear to hear more. "Our parents know about this, don't they?" There it was, the hesitation, the flicker of guilt. "They do," she admitted. "They support us. They've always known Chris was the better fit." A harsh laugh escaped me, bitter and raw. "Of course they do. Why wouldn't they support their favorite son? The one they've always held up as my superior." She crossed her arms, defensive now. "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that," I said. "They've been planning this, haven't they? Your new life with Chris, complete with their blessing." Mia's silence was all the confirmation I needed. My hands clenched at my sides, and I forced myself to focus. Anger would get me nowhere right now. "Do you really think this ends well for you?" I asked quietly. "We've made our choice," she said, a hint of desperation in her voice. "You need to accept that. Accept that my wife and brother betrayed me? That my parents conspired against me?" I shook my head. "I won't accept anything." I moved to the shelf and picked up a small decorative box, removing the USB drive inside. "You made your choice, Mia. Now you'll live with the consequences." She took a step back, suddenly wary. "What are you talking about?" I inserted the drive into my laptop, opening the files. Video after video of her secret conversations, meetings, and confessions played out. "Every lie, every moment you thought you were safe, it's all here." Her eyes widened. "You spied on me? You left me no choice. This is a violation. You can't do this." She moved toward me, anger flaring. "Can't I?" I said, my voice deadly calm. I already have, and so has my lawyer. You recorded me without my knowledge, she spat. You're going to pay for this. Perhaps, I conceded, but not before everyone knows the truth. I won't be the one left in the dark while you and Chris play house. She glared at me, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and fear. You're a monster. No, Mia, you and Chris are the monsters here, I said. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. The confrontation ended when she stormed out, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors like a gavel striking down judgment. I watched her go, each step echoing the end of whatever we once had. I stayed up all night, reviewing every piece of evidence again and again. It wasn't enough to know I was right. I needed to make sure nothing was missed, no detail overlooked. My phone buzzed constantly, calls from Chris, from my parents. I ignored each one, their voices nothing but static to me now. The next morning, I was running on caffeine and rage when I met with my lawyer. Stone's office was cold and sterile, a reflection of the man himself, but I appreciated his no-nonsense approach. You've been busy, he said, flipping through the files and recordings. This is comprehensive. I don't want just a divorce, I said. I want them to know they've lost everything. Stone nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. With this evidence, we have leverage, but you need to be prepared. This will get ugly. It already is, I said. I'm ready. We spent hours strategizing, mapping out every possible move. Stone was relentless, dissecting each piece of evidence like a surgeon. By the end, I felt drained but resolute. This wasn't just about ending my marriage, it was about reclaiming my life. When I left the office, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on me. But I wasn't alone, not entirely. I received a call from Jade, Chris's wife. Her voice was raw, broken, but determined. Drew, she said, thank you for telling me. You deserve to know, I replied. Are you okay? Not even close, she admitted. But I'm not going to let them win. They've taken enough from both of us. We agreed to meet later, to support each other through the storm. I never imagined I'd find an ally in Jade, but betrayal has a way of creating unexpected bonds. Back at home, I started packing Mia's things. Each piece of clothing, each trinket felt like a weight being lifted. This was my space now, my life to rebuild. When I came across the wedding photo, the one I'd traced with such longing just days ago, I placed it face down. It wasn't a memory worth keeping anymore. The day dragged on, each minute stretching into eternity. Then, just after sunset, my parents showed up at my door. I opened it, their concerned faces a mockery of the support they claimed to offer. Drew, my mother began, we need to talk. There's nothing left to say. Please, she insisted, this isn't you. No, it isn't, I agreed. You don't know who I am, you never did. My father's voice was harsh, trying to assert control. Be reasonable, son. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Reasonable? Like planning an engagement party for my wife and brother while I was still married to her? They flinched, and for a moment I saw regret. But it was too little, too late. I shut the door in their faces, cutting them off for good. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, evidence gathering, and silent nights spent alone. Jade and I kept in touch, sharing updates and offering each other strength. She was a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. One evening, as I was sorting through more documents, I received a call from Mia. Her voice was desperate, pleading for me to reconsider. There's nothing left to reconsider, I said. You made your choice. Please, Drew, she said. It's not just about us, it's about the baby. The baby isn't mine, I said coldly. It's yours and Chris's. Handle it however you want. I ended the call, feeling both numb and resolute. I wouldn't be pulled back into her lies. A week later, Jade and I faced Chris and Mia across a conference table in Stone's office. They looked haggard, desperate. Their lawyers tried to spin narratives of reconciliation, mistakes, and misunderstood intentions. I let them talk. Then I placed the recordings on the table. Every word, every lie. Jade added her own evidence, messages, financial records, and more. By the end of the meeting, Chris and Mia were pale, their facades shattered. There was no escape for them now. Outside the office, Jade and I stood in silence for a moment. What now? She asked. Now we make sure they face every consequence, I said, Dot. Over the next few days, the weight of everything settled into a grim routine. I went through each day on autopilot, meetings, calls, sorting through what was left of my life. I rarely spoke to anyone except Stone and Jade. Even my close friends kept their distance, unsure of what to say or do. The gossip had spread, and the air was thick with whispers and sideways glances whenever I was out in public. Jade and I kept our alliance strong. It wasn't friendship exactly, there was too much pain between us for that, but it was a bond of mutual survival. We met frequently, trading information and building our cases against Chris and Mia. There were times we sat in silence, simply sharing the exhaustion and the weight of betrayal. On one of those days, we met at a quiet cafe, the kind where no one asked questions. I found more emails, Jade said, sliding a folder across the table. This goes back even further than we thought. I opened it, my jaw tightening as I read. They were planning this for over a year. Yeah, she said softly, while pretending everything was fine. I closed the folder, trying to keep the anger from consuming me. How are you holding up? I asked. Dot. She gave me a tight smile. Depends on the minute. Same. We sat in silence, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. It was a relief to be around someone who understood without needing an explanation. Do you ever wonder how it got this bad? She asked suddenly, her voice low. All the time, I admitted. I don't think we'll ever really know. She nodded, her gaze distant. I just keep thinking, what did I miss? What signs were there? Does it matter? I asked, my voice harder than I intended. They chose this. Yeah, she said, but it still feels like I should have seen it coming. We didn't say anything else after that. When we left the cafe, we went our separate ways, back to the chaos we were trying to control. Later that night, I received a message from Mia. She wanted to meet. I stared at the screen for a long time, the temptation to respond warring with my better judgment. I needed answers, closure, something that would make sense of it all. But deep down, I knew there were no answers that would satisfy me. I deleted the message and went back to my preparations. The following week, Jade called me in a panic. Chris is trying to liquidate assets, she said. He's moving money. Where? I asked, already reaching for my laptop. Offshore accounts. He thinks he can hide it. Not for long, I said, my voice cold. Send me everything. Within hours, we had traced the transfers. Jade's lawyer was already filing motions to freeze the accounts. I notified Stone, who assured me this was exactly what we needed to show the extent of Chris's betrayal. As the pieces fell into place, I felt a grim satisfaction. Every move they made was digging their own grave deeper. That evening, I returned home to find another envelope waiting for me. No return address. Inside, there was a note scrawled in handwriting I recognized too well. Drew, we need to talk. Please, this isn't what you think. I crumpled the note and tossed it aside. Whatever Mia had to say, it didn't matter anymore. The next morning, Stone called. We have a court date, he said, 3 weeks from now. Good, I replied. I'm ready. But I wasn't ready. Not really. I spent the days leading up to the hearing going over every detail with Stone, preparing for every argument, every twist they might throw at us. At night, I barely slept. The moments of silence were the hardest, filled with memories I couldn't escape. Mia's laughter, her touch, the life we had built together, it all felt like a cruel joke. One night, after hours of restless pacing, I drove to the apartment Mia and I had shared. It was late and the streets were quiet. I let myself in, the familiar scent of the place hitting me like a punch to the gut. I walked through each room, remembering the life we'd built. Everything felt frozen in time, as if waiting for me to come back and make sense of it all. In the bedroom, I found one of Mia's sweaters draped over the chair. I picked it up, the scent of her perfume lingering. Anger and grief twisted inside me, and I hurled the sweater across the room. It landed on the bed, as lifeless as the marriage it once symbolized. I left the apartment that night, knowing I wouldn't return. On the day of the hearing, I dressed carefully, choosing a suit that projected confidence and strength. This wasn't just about winning, it was about reclaiming my life. Jade met me outside the courthouse, her expression steely. "We've got this," she said, more for herself than for me. "Yeah," I agreed. "We do." The hearing was brutal. Stone tore through their defenses with precision, laying out every detail of their affair, the financial schemes, the lies. Chris and Mia tried to put on a united front, but under the weight of the evidence, they crumbled. Mia's lawyer tried to paint me as a controlling husband, but Stone countered with undeniable proof of her deceit. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my voice steady, even as the emotions threatened to choke me. "I trusted my wife," I said, meeting Mia's eyes. "I believed in our marriage. I believed in my family. They took that trust and shattered it." Mia looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. When it was over, he ruled in my favor. I retained the house, the assets, everything. Mia was left with nothing. Chris's financial misconduct meant he was facing not just ruin, but potential criminal charges. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Jade and I stood in the cold wind, the weight of the victory settling in. "We did it," she said, her voice soft. "Yeah," I said, but I felt no triumph, just exhaustion. "Now what?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. For so long, my focus had been on the fight. Now that it was done, I felt lost. "One step at a time," I said. She nodded. "One step at a time." We parted ways, each of us carrying our own scars. The fight was over, but the healing would take much longer. That night, I sat alone in the empty apartment, the silence pressing in. I thought about everything that had been lost: trust, love, family. I knew I couldn't go back, but I also knew I couldn't let the past define me. I raised a glass to the darkness, to starting over. And with that, I let go of the past, determined to build something new, something real. The days after the court ruling were a blur of finalities. Papers were signed, belongings divided, and the remnants of my marriage packed away into boxes. Mia moved out with whatever she was legally entitled to, which wasn't much. I avoided seeing her during the process, unable to stomach one more empty apology or another pleading look. The life we had built together was gone. What remained was a hollow shell. Once the legalities were over, the silence became deafening. Every corner of the house reminded me of what had been lost. I couldn't even sit at the kitchen table without picturing Mia across from me, laughing over coffee, or discussing plans for the future. A future that no longer existed. One evening, as I sifted through more paperwork, Jade called. Her voice was raw but steady. "I'm getting out of here," she said. "Out of where?" I asked. "The city. I need to put some distance between me and everything," she replied. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while. I thought you should know." I didn't ask when she'd be back or if she'd be back at all. I understood the need to escape, to start over somewhere that didn't echo with memories of betrayal. "I hope it helps," I said quietly. There was a pause. "You'll be okay?" she asked. "I have to be," I replied. After we hung up, I poured myself a drink and sat in the dark. Jade's decision to leave felt like the closing of another chapter. She and I had fought side by side, but now it was time to face the aftermath on our own. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work. Stone kept me busy with ongoing matters, and I buried myself in cases, meetings, and the day-to-day grind. It was the only thing that kept me from drowning in my thoughts. I wanted to move forward, to rebuild, but every step felt heavy, as if I were dragging the weight of the past with me. One morning, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my door. No return address. I tore it open, expecting more legal documents or some desperate plea from Mia or Chris. Instead, it was a single sheet of paper with 2 words scrawled across it. "I'm sorry. It didn't matter who sent it." The apology changed nothing. I burned the note, watching the flames consume the paper until it was nothing but ashes. A few days later, Stone called me into his office. "Take a seat," he said, his tone unreadable. I sat, waiting for him to continue. "Cole is trying to cut a deal," he said finally. "Reduced charges in exchange for information about others involved in the embezzlement." I stared at him, processing the words. "So, he's turning on his own people now?" "It's what desperate men do," Stone replied. But it doesn't change anything for you. The damage is already done. What does he want from me? I asked. He claims he wants to make amends, says he regrets everything. I laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. Regret won't fix anything. Stone nodded. I thought you'd say that. Just know that you're in a position of power now. You don't have to engage. I stood, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. Let him rot. Stone watched me carefully. Be careful, Drew. Holding on to anger can consume you. It already has, I said, leaving his office. Life continued in its slow, grinding way. I forced myself to go out with friends occasionally, to smile and pretend that I was okay. But every moment felt forced. Conversations were shallow, laughter hollow. The people around me tried to help, but they didn't understand. How could they? None of them had watched their lives crumble because of the people they trusted most. One night, as I walked home from a bar, I found myself standing in front of Mia's new apartment. I didn't plan it. My feet just led me there. The lights were on, and through the window, I could see her moving around the living room. She looked different, tired, worn down. I should have felt satisfaction at seeing her this way, but all I felt was emptiness. I turned and walked away, leaving her behind once and for all. Months passed, and slowly things began to change. The pain dulled, the memories faded. I started to find small moments of peace, a quiet morning coffee, a long run through the park, an evening spent reading a book. They were fleeting, but they reminded me that life went on. Jade called me one afternoon, her voice lighter than I'd heard in a long time. I think I'm ready to come back, she said. That's good, I replied, genuinely happy for her. How are you? She asked. Better, I said. And for the first time, it felt true. When Jade returned, we met for coffee. She looked stronger, more at peace. We talked about everything and nothing, the people we'd been, the people we were becoming. There were no grand declarations or promises to stay in each other's lives forever. We'd shared a chapter, but now it was time to write our own stories. As we parted ways, I felt lighter. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to define me. One evening, as the sun set over the city, I stood on my balcony watching the lights flicker on below. The world kept moving, indifferent to my pain, and that was okay. I raised a glass to the sky, to the new life I was building, and let the past drift away. It was time to start living again. Time pressed on, and I slowly fell into a new routine. The days were filled with work, projects, and late nights in the office. I didn't mind. The busier I kept myself, the less time I had to dwell on what had been lost. Some nights were harder than others, quiet moments when memories crept in unbidden, but I pushed through. I had learned to endure. Jade and I stayed in touch, but our paths were diverging. She was rebuilding her life, focusing on her daughter and carving out a new future. She seemed determined to make it work, and I respected her for that. We met for coffee a few times, sharing updates, but the intensity that had bound us together was gone. We were survivors, yes, but now we were moving forward on our own terms. One afternoon, as I was wrapping up a meeting, my assistant knocked on my office door. You have a visitor, she said, looking slightly uneasy. Who is it? I asked, already dreading the answer. It's your brother, she replied softly. I felt the familiar wave of anger rise in my chest, but forced myself to stay calm. Send him in, I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Cole walked in, looking every bit the shadow of the man he once was. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He carried a weight that he hadn't before, a weight of his own making. Drew, he began, his voice hoarse. Thank you for seeing me. I said nothing, letting the silence speak for me. He shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. I know I have no right to ask for anything, he continued. I need to say some things. Go ahead, I said coldly. I messed up, he said, his voice cracking. I destroyed everything. I hurt you. I hurt Jade, and I hurt myself. I thought I was untouchable, that I could have everything I wanted without consequences. I was wrong. I watched him, feeling nothing but a hollow ache. Why are you here, Cole? He ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders sagging. I don't know, he admitted. I guess I thought maybe I could apologize. that maybe it would make a difference. An apology won't change anything, I said. It won't undo what you did. He nodded, as if expecting that answer. I know, but I needed you to hear it. I stood, signaling that the conversation was over. You need to live with the choices you made, just like I had to. He swallowed hard, a flicker of something, regret, desperation, crossing his face. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Goodbye, Cole, I said, turning away Dot. He left without another word, and I felt the weight of his presence lift. It wasn't closure, but it was something. A reminder that I had moved past him, that I was stronger than the man who had betrayed me, Dot. In the weeks that followed, I began to feel like myself again. The fog lifted little by little. I reconnected with old friends, took up hobbies I had abandoned, and started to see the world with fresh eyes. The betrayal had scarred me, but it hadn't broken me. I was still here, still standing. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Mia. She looked different, worn down, tired. She approached hesitantly, her expression unsure. Hi, Drew, she said quietly. Mia, I replied, keeping my voice even. I didn't expect to see you here, she said, fiddling with the strap of her purse. It's my office, I said, unable to keep the edge out of my tone. Right, she said, looking away. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know it's too little, too late, but I need you to know that. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. Why do you care now? She bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes. Because I lost everything. I thought I was gaining something new, something better, but I was wrong. I hurt you, and I hurt myself. I wanted to feel satisfaction at her words, but all I felt was exhaustion. We can't go back, Mia. I know, she whispered. I hope you find happiness. You deserve it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there for a moment, letting her words wash over me before shaking them off and heading home. The next chapter of my life unfolded slowly, but steadily. I focused on rebuilding, on creating a life that was mine alone. I surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me, who had stood by me through the darkest moments. I found joy in small things. A good book, a long run, a quiet evening with friends. One day, Jade called me with news. She had found a new job, one that would allow her to support herself and her daughter. I'm doing it, she said, her voice filled with pride. I'm making it work. I never doubted you, I replied. Thank you, Drew, she said, for everything. We talked for a while longer, reminiscing and laughing. When we hung up, I felt a sense of peace. We had both come so far. Months turned into a year. The pain of the past faded, replaced by a quiet strength. I no longer dwelled on what had happened. I had survived, and I had rebuilt. And I knew that whatever the future held, I was ready. As the sun set over the city, I stood on my balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand. I raised it to the horizon, to the life I had reclaimed, and let the past slip away. I was free. Months continued to pass, and the rhythms of life settled into something resembling peace. Work kept me busy, and for the first time in years, I felt in control of my own destiny. I was the master of my own decisions, my own path. But the past had a way of resurfacing when least expected. One morning, as I was preparing for a presentation, I received an unexpected message on my work phone. It was from an unknown number. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen before finally opening it. Meet me for coffee. Please, I need to talk. Mia. The request was simple, but it sent my mind spinning. I considered ignoring it, deleting it, and moving on. But curiosity, or perhaps a need for finality, got the best of me. I replied with a simple time and place. A quiet cafe where we wouldn't be interrupted. The cafe was almost empty when I arrived. Mia was already seated in a corner booth, looking nervous. She had changed since the last time I saw her, her face lined with stress, her eyes heavy with regret. I approached slowly, taking a seat across from her without saying a word. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice soft. What do you want, Mia? I asked, keeping my tone even. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. I wanted to apologize again. I know I already did, but it doesn't feel like enough. Apologies don't change what happened, I replied bluntly. I know, she said quickly, but I need you to understand. I was lost. I made a terrible mistake. I hurt you and everyone around me. I studied her for a moment, looking for sincerity. Why now? Why bring this up again? Because I can't move forward without facing what I did, she said, her voice breaking. I can't keep pretending that I'm okay when I'm not. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. You have to live with what you did, Mia. That's not my problem anymore. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I know, I wanted to tell you that I'm trying to change. I'm going to therapy. I'm working on myself. Good for you, I said, my voice cold. But that doesn't change anything for me. Her shoulders slumped. I get that. I just wanted you to know. Silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I finally stood, ready to leave. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Mia. But I don't want to be a part of it. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. I didn't need her apology, but hearing it reinforced what I already knew. I had moved on. Her actions no longer defined me. Life continued its steady march forward. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects and expanding my horizons. I traveled more, exploring places I had only dreamed of visiting. I found joy in simple moments, watching a sunrise, sharing a laugh with a friend, learning something new. The wounds of the past healed slowly, but they did heal. One day, Jade reached out with unexpected news. She had found a small house outside the city, a place she could call her own. She invited me to see it, and I gladly accepted. When I arrived, I found her in the garden, planting flowers with her daughter, a beautiful little girl with bright eyes and a contagious laugh. It's not much, Jade said, wiping dirt from her hands as she greeted me. But it's ours. It's perfect, I said honestly, looking around. The house was cozy and inviting, a reflection of Jade's resilience and strength. Thank you, she said, her eyes softening, for everything. You're the one who made it happen, I replied. You should be proud. She smiled, and for a moment, the weight of everything we'd been through seemed to lift. We walked through the garden, talking and laughing, and I realized how far we had come. We were no longer defined by what had happened to us. We were defined by what we had built in its aftermath. In the months that followed, I found myself reconnecting with the things I loved. I took up painting again, filling canvases with color and emotion. I joined a hiking group, exploring trails and making new friends. I even started dating again, cautiously opening myself up to the possibility of love. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the past threatened to drag me back. But I refused to let it. I was stronger now. I knew who I was and what I deserved. One evening, I found myself on a date with a woman named Erin. She was smart, funny, and unpretentious. We talked for hours, sharing stories and laughing. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people enjoying each other's company. At the end of the night, as we stood outside the restaurant, she looked at me with a gentle smile. I had a great time. Me too, I said, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Would you like to do this again? She asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. We parted ways, and as I walked home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to define me. I had survived. I had rebuilt. And now, I was ready to live again. 1 year after everything fell apart, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below. The air was crisp, the scent of autumn in the wind. I raised a glass to the horizon, to the life I had reclaimed. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, but I had also found strength, resilience, and a new sense of purpose. I was free. As the days turned into weeks, life continued to settle into a rhythm of renewal and quiet strength. I found myself embracing the little moments that had once passed me by. The sound of birds chirping on a quiet morning, the laughter of friends during impromptu gatherings, and the simple joy of a good book and a cup of coffee. I was healing, not just surviving, but truly living again. Work kept me focused, providing both stability and purpose. My role at the firm had grown since the dust of the past settled. I took on more challenging projects, guided younger associates, and felt the respect of my peers solidify around me. The confidence I'd lost was slowly coming back, and it felt good. Like finding an old friend who'd been gone for too long. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was Jade. "Hey," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that had been hard-earned over the past months. "Are you free tonight? There's a charity event downtown. I thought you might want to come." "A charity event?" I asked, leaning back in my office chair. "That's a bit fancy, isn't it?" She laughed, a sound that was more genuine than I'd heard in a long time. "It's not, black tie. Just an excuse for people to spend money on a good cause." "Sounds like my kind of night," I said. "I'll be there." The venue was a restored historic building with high ceilings and ornate moldings. The event was in support of a local community center, raising funds for at-risk youth programs. As I walked through the doors, I was struck by how alive it all felt. The chatter, the music, the buzz of people coming together for something bigger than themselves. Jade spotted me first, waving me over. She looked radiant, her smile wide and unburdened. We hugged briefly, and for a moment, I marveled at how much had changed. A year ago, we were broken in so many ways. Now we were here, standing tall, choosing to be part of something positive. "Glad you made it," she said, handing me a glass of sparkling water. "The keynote speaker is supposed to be incredible." We mingled, talked, and even danced a little. It was a celebration, not just of the cause, but of resilience, friendship, and new beginnings. At one point, I stepped away to catch my breath, standing by a window that overlooked the city lights. "Taking a break?" a familiar voice said beside me. I turned to see Erin, the woman I'd been on a few dates with. We hadn't seen each other in weeks due to conflicting schedules, but there she was, looking as surprised as I felt. "Erin," I said, smiling, "fancy meeting you here." "I volunteer with the community center," she explained, a touch of pride in her voice. "Didn't expect to see you here, though." "I got an invitation from a friend," I said, nodding towards Jade, who was laughing with a small group nearby. "It's a great cause." "It is," she agreed, her eyes softening as she looked at me. "Want to catch up over coffee sometime?" "I'd like that," I said, feeling a flutter of something that had been missing for too long. In the weeks that followed, Erin and I saw more of each other. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people enjoying each other's company. We talked about everything, our pasts, our dreams, the things that scared us and the things that made us laugh. With every conversation, every shared moment, I felt a little more alive. Jade continued to rebuild her life as well. Her daughter, Ava, was thriving, and every time I saw them together, it was a reminder of the strength and love that had carried us both through the darkest times. We supported each other as friends, as chosen family. There was a bond between us that would never break, a bond forged in fire and tempered by time. One evening, Erin invited me over for dinner. It was a simple meal, pasta, garlic bread, a salad, but it felt like so much more. As we ate, we talked about the future, about what we wanted from life. "I don't want to rush things," she said, twirling her fork, "but I really like where this is going." "Me too," I said honestly. "I'm not in a hurry. I just like spending time with you." "Good," she said, her smile lighting up the room. "Then we're on the same page." After dinner, we sat on the couch, sipping wine and talking late into the night. I hadn't felt this comfortable with someone in years. When I finally left, I walked home with a spring in my step. Life was moving forward. One morning, as I was sipping coffee on my balcony, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert. Something about corporate restructuring at Cole's former company. He had taken a plea deal months ago for the embezzlement charges, serving a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. I didn't need to read the article to know the fallout was ongoing. For a brief moment, I thought about Cole, about Summer, about my parents. Their betrayals still stung, but the wounds were no longer fresh. I had moved beyond the pain, choosing to build a life worth living instead of dwelling in bitterness. I wished them no ill, but I wouldn't waste my energy on their choices anymore. That chapter was closed. I focused on what mattered: my friends, my career, the people I loved. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was more than enough. A knock on my door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Jade holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need a refill," she said, grinning. Always, I replied, letting her in. We sat on the balcony, watching the world wake up around us. We talked, laughed, and shared stories, just like we always had. We had survived the worst together, and now we were building something better. One day at a time. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I was free from the past, focused on the present, and hopeful for the future. Life was good, messy, unpredictable, and challenging, but good. And that was more than enough. In the months that followed, life continued to unfold in unexpected but deeply rewarding ways. Each day brought new challenges, but also new reasons to smile, new reasons to hope, and new ways to embrace what lay ahead. Erin and I continued to grow closer. There was something refreshing about being with her, an honesty and ease that I hadn't realized I'd been craving. She was genuine, strong, and fiercely kind. We'd go on long walks through the park, talking about everything from work stress to childhood memories, from dreams we still hoped to chase to fears we were still learning to navigate. It felt like starting over in the best possible way. One rainy afternoon, we ducked into a small bookstore to escape a sudden downpour. The scent of paper and coffee enveloped us as we wandered through the aisles, laughing at old book covers and sharing recommendations. At one point, Erin picked up a worn paperback and handed it to me. "This one changed my life," she said, her eyes earnest. I flipped through the pages, smiling at the dog-eared corners and underlined passages. "I'll read it," I promised. "Good," she said. "I'll quiz you." The rain continued to fall, but we stayed inside, talking and reading. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so content in such a simple moment. Work remained a steady anchor in my life. I'd taken on a new role that allowed me to mentor younger associates, guiding them through their cases and helping them navigate the complexities of the industry. I saw pieces of myself in some of them, the eagerness, the ambition, the drive. It felt good to give back, to be part of someone else's journey. One day, as I wrapped up a meeting, my phone buzzed with a call from Jade. "Are you free tonight?" she asked. "I could use a babysitter." "For Ava or for you?" I teased. "Both," she replied, laughing. "It's been a long week. Count me in." When I arrived at Jade's apartment, Ava greeted me with a wide, toothless smile. She was growing so quickly, her bright eyes taking in everything around her. Jade looked tired but happy, a combination I'd come to understand well. "You're a lifesaver," she said, handing me Ava's favorite stuffed animal. "I just need a couple of hours to myself." "Go," I said, waving her off. "We've got this." The evening was filled with laughter, baby giggles, and the kind of chaos that only comes with a toddler. Ava was a reminder of resilience and innocence, a tiny force of nature who'd come into the world under difficult circumstances, but was thriving nonetheless. When Jade returned, she looked more relaxed. We talked over a late dinner, catching up on work and life. "How are you really doing?" I asked, meeting her eyes. She took a deep breath. "Better. Some days are still hard, but most days, I'm okay. Ava makes it worth it." I nodded, understanding more than I could say. "You're doing an incredible job." "So are you," she said, smiling softly. "I'm glad we have each other." "Me too." As winter gave way to spring, Erin and I planned a weekend getaway. It was a chance to disconnect from work, from responsibilities, and just enjoy being together. We rented a cabin by a lake, surrounded by tall trees and quiet trails. It was exactly what we needed. On the second morning, we sat on the porch, sipping coffee as the sun rose. Birds chirped, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. "I've been thinking," Erin said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Uh-oh," I teased. "That sounds serious." She rolled her eyes, but her smile remained. "About us. About what comes next." I set my mug down, my heart suddenly pounding. "Okay. I don't have all the answers," she continued, "but I know I want this to be real. I want to keep building whatever this is." "Me too," I said, my voice steady. "Whatever this becomes, I'm all in." She leaned in, pressing her forehead to mine. "Good." In that moment, I knew we were taking a leap together, one that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. But I trusted her, and I trusted what we were creating. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. One evening. As I was working late, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. I stared at it for a long time, the words blurring together. It had been months since I'd last spoken to my parents. They'd tried to reach out, tried to make amends in their own way, but I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready. The message was simple. We miss you. Can we talk? I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Forgiveness was complicated. I wasn't sure what I wanted from them, or if reconciliation was even possible. The wounds they'd inflicted still ran deep, but I couldn't ignore the part of me that longed for some kind of closure. I didn't respond that night. Instead, I focused on the work in front of me, on the life I was building without them. There would be time to deal with the past, but it didn't have to be today. Life moved forward. Aaron and I grew closer. Jade and I continued to support each other. Work flourished. The pieces of my life that had once felt shattered were slowly coming together, forming a new mosaic. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, as I stood on my balcony watching the city lights, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I'd been broken, betrayed, and left to pick up the pieces. But I'd done it. I'd built something stronger, something worth fighting for. I raised my glass to the night sky, to new beginnings, to resilience, to love. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready for whatever it held. The last few months had brought clarity and growth in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Life was still a series of ups and downs, but I was beginning to see it as a journey worth embracing. Imperfections, surprises, and all. One sunny afternoon, Aaron and I hosted a small gathering at my place. It was nothing fancy, just a barbecue with close friends, good food, and laughter. As we set up chairs and prepared the grill, I marveled at how natural it felt to have her by my side, helping me organize and making jokes as we worked. Jade arrived with Ava in tow. The little girl had grown so much, toddling around on unsteady legs and giggling whenever someone picked her up. Jade looked happier than I'd seen her in a long time, and it warmed my heart to know she was finding her footing again. She's a handful, Jade said, laughing as Ava tried to grab a plate of snacks. But she keeps me grounded. I nodded. She's a fighter, like her mom. Jade's smile was soft, touched with a hint of pride. Thanks, Wade. Throughout the afternoon, I caught glimpses of Aaron playing with Ava, laughing with my friends, and chatting with Jade. She fit into my world seamlessly, like she'd always been there. At one point, she caught me watching and raised an eyebrow. What? She teased, a playful smile tugging at her lips. Just wondering how I got this lucky, I said, meaning every word. She rolled her eyes, but I saw the blush that crept up her cheeks. Charmer. The day passed in a blur of laughter, good food, and memories in the making. As the sun began to set, we all gathered around the fire pit, sharing stories and toasting to the moments that had brought us together. It felt like a new chapter, a reminder that even after the darkest storms, there was light. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my parents, their handwriting unmistakable. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I was ready to face whatever they had to say. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was long, filled with apologies and attempts to explain their actions. They spoke of regret, of wanting to repair our relationship, of missing their son. It was heartfelt, but it didn't erase the pain they'd caused. I wasn't ready to forgive them, not yet, maybe not ever, but I wasn't ready to shut the door completely either. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. It would be there for another day, whenever I felt ready to confront it. Healing wasn't linear, and I had to take it at my own pace. Work continued to challenge and fulfill me. The younger associates I mentored often came to me for advice, not just on cases, but on life. I found myself drawing from my own experiences, sharing the lessons I'd learned through heartache and resilience. It was rewarding in a way I hadn't expected. One afternoon, as I wrapped up a meeting, Erin appeared in my office doorway. She leaned against the frame, her arms crossed, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Busy?" she asked. "Always," I replied with a grin. "But I can make time for you." "Good." She stepped inside, holding up an envelope. I got us tickets. For what? You'll see. She wouldn't tell me anything else, no matter how much I pressed. I had to admit, her sense of mystery was intriguing. The evening of the surprise arrived, and we found ourselves at a small theater downtown. The show turned out to be an improv comedy performance, filled with quick wit, unexpected twists, and plenty of laughter. By the end of the night, my cheeks hurt from smiling, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Good surprise? Erin asked as we walked back to the car. The best, I said, taking her hand. Thank you. For what? For reminding me that life can be good. She squeezed my hand. It is good, Wade. We just have to keep making it that way. As spring turned to summer, I continued to rebuild, piece by piece. There were moments of doubt, moments when memories of betrayal threatened to pull me back under. But I had a strong support system. A reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. Jade and I continued to support each other, navigating co-parenting with grace and resilience. Ava's milestones became moments of joy for both of us, a testament to the strength we'd found in each other. Erin and I grew closer, building a relationship built on trust, respect, and genuine connection. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people choosing to be together, day by day. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Erin spoke quietly. I love you, Wade. The words were simple but profound. I turned to her, my heart full. I love you too. We sat in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever the future held, we'd face it together. The final step in my journey came unexpectedly. I was walking through the park one morning when I spotted my parents on a nearby bench. They saw me, and for a moment, we simply stared at each other. Then, slowly, they stood and approached. My mother's eyes were red, her expression filled with a mix of hope and fear. Wade, she whispered. I didn't know what to say. The wounds they'd inflicted were still there, but so was the bond we'd once shared. It would take time, if it happened at all. I'm not ready, I said finally. We understand, my father replied, his voice thick with emotion. But we'll be here when you are. I nodded, then turned and walked away. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. Life isn't perfect, and it never will be. But I've learned that it doesn't have to be. It's the people we choose to keep close, the moments we choose to cherish, and the strength we find within ourselves that make it worth living. I'm not the same man I was before the betrayal. I'm stronger, wiser, and more determined to live authentically, to love deeply, to forgive when I'm ready, and to keep moving forward one step at a time. As I stood on my porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace. The past would always be there, but it didn't have to define me. The future was unwritten, and I was ready to make it my own. To new beginnings, to resilience, to hope. And to whatever comes next. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.